Egyptian archaeologists made an amazing discovery near Cairo just recently. Drumroll, please? The oldest and most complete mummy ever found in the country. Yes, they really kept it a secret. The 4,300-year-old mummy was found in a group of tombs close to the Step Pyramid of Djoser, dating back to Egypt's Old Kingdom. It was covered in layers of gold. The team also found several other tombs, including one belonging to an ancient Egyptian official and another belonging to a keeper of secrets who had the power to perform special ceremonies. Another interesting tomb was that of a writer, and it had the biggest statues ever found in the area. This huge burial site is also home to more than a dozen pyramids and burial grounds. Probably one of the most famous mummies in the world is that of Hatshepsut. She ruled Egypt like a boss for around 20 years, building all kinds of impressive buildings and creating new trade routes. But when archaeologist Howard Carter found her tomb in the Valley of the Kings, her sarcophagus was empty. However, Carter did find two coffins in another tomb, one of which belonged to Hatshepsut's wet nurse and the other to an unknown woman. In 2006, a team of specialists decided to investigate whether that mystery woman was the queen herself. They found a molar tooth in a wooden box with Hatshepsut's name on it, and when they compared it to a gap in the mummy's mouth, it was a perfect match. Ramesses II was a pretty impressive ruler, but it was his mummy that later made history. Now, we do not hear too much about his daddy. Okay, I will stop. Ramesses is considered the most powerful pharaoh in all of Egypt because he ruled for a huge 6 decades. He also lived to be over 90 years old. Now, that is pretty amazing for the time he lived in. Ramesses II supposedly had over 100 children too. Talk about a big family. When he passed away, his body was first buried in the Valley of the Kings, but some sneaky guys tried to rob his tomb of all its treasures. Officials back then were not having any of that though. So, they moved his body to a secret place to keep it safe. Fast forward to the 1800s, and Ramesses II's mummy was discovered along with a bunch of other rulers and important officials. But it was not in the best condition. So, archaeologists flew it to Paris to get it, well, pampered. The problem was, he could not just be taken into another country. The only answer was to give Ramesses II his own passport. His job was listed as king, and the document even had his photo. Most mummies are not exactly known for having very hydrated skin, but that of an ancient woman, also known as Lady Di, proves otherwise. No, not that Lady Di. This rich lady from ancient times was discovered in a fancy tomb in 1971, and she looked fabulous, if we can say that about a mummy. Thanks to the special conditions in her tomb, like the moisture in the air and the lack of oxygen, her body was almost perfectly preserved. Her skin was soft, her hair looked great, and she was still flexible. The museum that now proudly displays her mummy also shows a ton of fancy items that were buried with her, like dinnerware and musical instruments. Archaeologists studied the mummy more and discovered that she died from a heart attack at around 50 years old. Even though she has not been around for over 2,000 years, Lady Di is still making history. The mummy of Ötzi the Iceman was discovered in the Alps in 1991. Austrian authorities first thought he was a modern mountain climber because he was so well preserved. It turned out he was actually from the Copper Age. He was found in a mountain pass over 10,000 feet above sea level. By studying his mummy, we have learned so much about life in Copper Age Europe. For example, we know that he was a native of Central Europe and liked eating meat. He also suffered from arthritis, narrow arteries, and stomach problems. But he likely used acupuncture and medicinal herbs to treat these conditions, and apparently, he was pretty handy with tools. He sharpened them just days before his untimely death. Who knows if he was expecting trouble or just getting ready for some normal work. Now, King Tut and his story are most likely what made all mummies famous. This pharaoh died at the young age of 19 more than 3,000 years ago. But his mummy is still one of the most well-known in the world. When his tomb was opened in 1922, people went wild because it was still untouched. Unlike many other royal tombs, it had some seriously flashy coffins, including one made of solid gold. Not only did Tut's tomb give us a look into ancient Egyptian history, but his mummy also taught us a lot about the time he lived in. DNA analysis helped identify his parents and showed that the pharaoh had a rare bone disorder that might have made walking a bit hard. Now, Ginger is probably one of the coolest mummies you will ever hear about. He is like a time traveler from 5,000 years ago who is still looking great with his golden hair and perfectly preserved nails. Ginger was discovered in Egypt and is believed to be the earliest known mummified body. Before people even knew about mummification, they used to place bodies in shallow graves in the hot, dry sand, and since the sand soaked up all the water, bacteria could not reproduce, and the body was preserved naturally. Now, scientists are not sure if Ginger's preservation was planned or not, but since he was buried with some pottery vessels, it is likely that whoever buried him knew some serious preservation methods. If you want to meet Ginger in person, he is now chilling at the British Museum. One Dutch art collector bought a statue from Asia and ended up making a strange discovery. The statue had a mummy hidden inside. Sadly, the body was too fragile to move, so they had to leave it there. The coolest part is that this mummy is over 1,000 years old and had been on display for 200 years before being placed inside the statue. When scientists did a CT scan, they found out that the mummy was filled with paper scraps covered in writing. Experts think he may have done something called self-mummification, which is a pretty intense process involving a special diet and tea that make your body less likely to grow bacteria. Only a few people could handle this ritual, and those who managed to do it were deeply respected. No other Egyptian queen has puzzled scientists and historians like the stunning Nefertiti. Based on her statues, she was known for her slender neck, wide eyes, and high cheekbones. Her name means, "The beautiful woman has come." Talk about living up to your name, huh? Even though she was not a pharaoh herself, Nefertiti still managed to leave a lasting mark. Written records suggest that, as a wife and queen, she had a very powerful role. Because of her power, she was admired, but she also made quite a lot of enemies during her life. She was also related to King Tut, but not by blood. Instead, she was his stepmother. So far, locals have not yet identified her mummy, but that may soon change. A local Egyptologist who has been busy digging up tombs in the Valley of the Kings has found two mummies that he believes could be Nefertiti and her daughter. According to specialists, we may soon finally get a clear answer about who these two mummies are. And if one of them really does turn out to be Nefertiti, we could be in for a real treat. DNA analysis and CT scans of the mummy could give us the most complete and accurate image of the queen that we have ever seen. It is crazy to think that we have only scratched the surface of what lies under modern-day Egypt. Nefertiti ruled during a time of great power and wealth in Egypt, but sadly died during a time of social trouble, which led to her burial place being lost. Now, where is my mummy? When you hear the word mummy, you might get a chill down your spine. That is because most of us connect this word with those creepy characters we have seen in scary movies. But in real life, mummies have helped us understand a lot about ancient civilizations, their rulers, and how people used to deal with losing their loved ones. The people most famous around the world for their mummies are the ancient Egyptians. They believed that some kind of life after death was possible if certain conditions were met. That is why they insisted on preserving the human body through the process of mummification and placing the mummy in a fully prepared tomb, kind of like giving it a fully working apartment of its own. Why did they believe this? Well, because they were deeply connected to their natural world for the most part. They saw the natural cycles around them, like how the sun rose every day followed by the moon, or how new life always grew from plants even after they had dried up. They also believed that the powerful spirit Osiris, who represented the cycle of death and resurrection, played a role in this process. To prepare for the afterlife, the ancient Egyptians followed certain rituals, like mummification, which used materials like honey, resins, and incense to preserve the body. There is no other mummy more popular than that of King Tut. He was a young pharaoh who ruled over 3,000 years ago in Egypt. The problem with discovering ancient royal tombs is that most of these burial sites had already been robbed. People knew ancient rulers had been buried with many valuable things, so those places became easy targets for thieves. When King Tut's tomb was opened in 1922, people were excited because it had not been robbed like many other royal tombs found before it. That is how well hidden it was. Inside, his mummy was placed in a total of 3 coffins, including one made of gold. The objects found in his tomb showed us what ancient Egypt was like, and studying his mummy also helped us learn about the culture and customs that were popular at the time when he died. We also learned about his family by looking at his DNA. Scientists were able to discover that he had a disease called malaria and a problem with his foot that might have made it hard for him to walk. Ramesses II was another pharaoh in Egypt who ruled for 68 years, which was quite a lot back then. He was known for his military campaigns and building projects. Many objects from his time as ruler still exist today, including a large statue of him. Ramesses II was about 6 feet tall and lived to be about 90 years old. After studying his mummy, scientists decided that he may have had a medical condition that affected his spine. Now, remember those thieves I mentioned before? They are probably the reason why Ramesses II ended up in a plain coffin in a secret group of royal mummies at Deir el-Bahari, which was rediscovered in 1881. Thankfully, archaeologists were able to identify him because his journeys had been recorded on his wrappings. The process was really tiring too. In fact, in ancient Egypt, the mummification process could take a huge 70 days to finish. A special person would say a very specific speech while carefully handling the body and drying it out using a type of salt called natron. They also used linen and resin to make the body look more lifelike and to wrap it in cloth. The tomb was just as important for ancient Egyptians. The walls of King Tut's tomb, for example, were covered with detailed artwork that showed his journey to the afterlife, from his burial procession to his trip through the underworld. The ancient Egyptians believed that everyone made this journey after death, and they filled their tombs with items and paintings to help the person on their spiritual travels. Also, the walls of the tomb were decorated with spells from a special book that contained a collection of poems the Egyptians believed would help people reach the afterlife. And speaking of how important this journey was, people also placed food in these ancient tombs. In King Tut's tomb, archaeologists discovered 36 jars of vintage drinks and 8 baskets of fruit that were believed to be left there to help him on his journey to the afterlife. The Egyptians believed that traveling to the afterlife took a really long time, so they left many supplies, such as food and water, to support their loved ones. Pharaohs also usually had many fancy clothes and beautiful jewelry in their tombs to make sure they would have a stylish journey. These items included many kinds of linen clothing such as tunics, scarves, gloves, and headdresses, as well as a lot of gold jewelry with precious stones like bracelets, buckles, pendants, necklaces, rings, and even precious insect-shaped charms for protection. Some were also buried with fans made from ivory and ostrich feathers to keep them cool in the afterlife. Some ancient rulers were even placed in their forever apartments along with boats. For example, Pharaoh Khufu built the Great Pyramid at Giza as his tomb, and a large ship was found inside. King Tut, however, was buried with multiple boat paddles, but no actual boat. Instead, he had 3 chariots and many walking sticks made of precious materials. Maybe that means he would rather travel to the next world by land, not by water. Among the most interesting objects found near ancient mummies are bottles of oils and perfumes. If rulers were supposed to be stylish, why not smell nice too, right? Also, some of them had ancient kinds of board games, most of them made from precious materials like gold or ivory. One of those games was called senet. It was very popular among the ancient Egyptians and very similar to modern-day chess. The ancient Egyptians may have the most famous mummies out there, but they were not the first to invent the process. In fact, it all started in South America with an ancient civilization called the Chinchorro. As far as we know today, these people were the first to mummify their loved ones who had died. They did it somewhere around 2,000 years before the Egyptians started their own rituals. Sure, we can tell a lot about ancient rulers by studying these mummies, but until recently, we had no idea what they really looked like when they were alive. Not too long ago though, some very special mummy paintings were found by archaeologists studying ancient Egyptian objects. These mummy portraits are highly detailed paintings of people that were made while they were still alive. These paintings were often painted on wood instead of the classic portraits we all know that are painted on canvas. They are known for their realism and beauty, and have even been used by researchers to diagnose diseases by comparing them to the matching mummies. Some of these portraits also show jewelry that was later found on the mummies. The recent discovery of these mummy portraits in Central Egypt is important because it marks the first time in over a century that such paintings have been found. Mummies also appeared naturally all around the world. Mummification can happen without people doing anything because of natural conditions, like very cold or hot places, places with little oxygen, or accidental contact with chemicals that preserve the body. These conditions do not let bacteria grow, so the body stays more or less whole. Famous Ötzi was one of these mummies. We know today he was a man who lived around 5,000 years ago in Europe. But when he was discovered in the Alps, in 1991, Austrian authorities first believed that he was a modern mountain climber, because of how well preserved the body was. However, after the Iceman was removed from the glacier, it was decided that he was actually from the Copper Age. A gruesome discovery happened in Egypt some years ago. Want to hear about it? 16 human hands carefully buried in 4 creepy pits. At first, they did not look much like human hands because they were unusually large, but they were. Strangely, there were only right hands. No left hands were anywhere to be seen. It turned out that this pointed to an ancient dark ritual. Old Egyptian art and stories talked about a ceremony where warriors would present the right hand of their enemies as proof of victory and ask for gold in return. Egyptians believed in the afterlife, so cutting off someone's hand meant cutting off their power forever. Making sure of this kind of defeat was interesting to the winning side. Here, the fight was between Egyptians and the Hyksos, who lived in what was once known as Canaan. Egypt has always been the center of some amazing history finds, and some time ago, this papyrus was found. If we stretched it out, it would be just a little bigger than the height of a skyscraper. The world's tiniest skyscraper, which is in Wichita Falls, Texas. When humans did not write in a notes app, they wrote on this thing made from the center of a papyrus plant. Around 2,000 years ago, ancient Egyptians wrote something like a book where they described most of their burial traditions and their ideas about the afterlife. It is considered one of the most important texts from ancient Egypt and is still sold in bookstores to this day. This ancient manuscript was dug up from a chamber located just south of the Pyramid of Djoser in Saqqara. Oh yes, Djoser is the oldest pyramid in Egypt, not the Giza pyramids like most people think. So recently, the site of Saqqara buzzed with excited archaeologists who probably found one of Egypt's oldest complete mummies. They believe that this beautiful and well-preserved mummy was that of a wealthy man. He was discovered in a deep shaft covered in layers of gold leaf. There are many signs showing he was an important and wealthy man, like the band he wore on his head, the bracelet on his chest, and the fact that he was embalmed with a tunic that was kept for Egypt's finest people. The most exciting part of the whole discovery was finding the burial place sealed with mortar, just as the ancient Egyptians had left it 4,300 years ago. Now, this may sound weird, but back in 2008, archaeologists discovered a missing pyramid. Now, it had gone missing because it had worn away over the span of 4,000 years. Today, you can only see its base. It was a pretty important site back in ancient times. It is said that around the pyramid, the ancients hosted a special ceremony where high priests carried the mummified remains of sacred bulls. Now, here is a fun fact. Ancient Egyptians believed that Apis bulls were earthly forms of the city god of Memphis and were connected to rites of fertility. It was not just any Apis bull, though. They had to be all black, with a single white mark between their horns and a bunch of very specific features. They were chosen by the local priests and honored until they died. After that, they were mummified and buried in underground galleries. Meanwhile, this missing pyramid sort of disappeared around the 1800s. It was a German archaeologist who first found it in the village of Saqqara. He called it the Headless Pyramid when he first found it. But then, years after the official discovery, the desert sand came along and covered the whole thing. There were some digs between the 19th and 20th centuries, but they were not very organized. That is why scientists were so thrilled when they uncovered the base of a whole pyramid after removing the 25-foot mound of sand that had been covering it. Oh, and it turns out, American archaeologists are digging up a cemetery in Egypt that could contain over 1 million mummified bodies. So far, archaeologists have dug up around 1,700 mummies. One of the main differences from other classic Egyptian mummies is that these people were not kings and pharaohs. They were common people who most likely lived about 1500 years ago when Egypt was controlled by the Roman and Byzantine empires. The name of the cemetery is cool though, the Way of the Water Buffalo, just in case you want to check it out on your next trip. Other than bulls and buffaloes, ancient Egyptians also liked baboons. Are you seeing a pattern here? At the start of the 20th century, archaeologists discovered a site filled with mummified baboons in a place called, guess what? The Valley of the Monkeys. An animal would not have been mummified if it was not considered important. Some animals were more important than others because they were linked to certain gods. Jackals were connected to Anubis, the ancient god of the afterlife, and cats were linked to the female goddess Bastet. Baboons were a pretty big deal because they were believed to be connected to Thoth, the god of wisdom and advisor to Ra, one of Egypt's highest gods. The archaeologists who studied these animals were not too happy. They think these baboons were kept indoors and were deprived of sunlight for most of their lives. They had extreme vitamin D deficiencies, and they were poorly fed. Maybe Thoth got angry with these baboon keepers. Just a guess. Since there is never a boring day for archaeologists in Egypt, they also found human mummies with golden tongues. Since Egyptians cared so much about the afterlife, they believed that golden tongues might help a person speak once they passed to the other side. I mean, it is a long shot, but hey, why not? Some of these mummies were placed in wooden coffins with goods such as necklaces, pottery, golden artifacts shaped like lotus flowers and scarab beetles, and iPhones. Yeah, just kidding. A new temple was also recently discovered in Egypt. Scientists believe it was built to honor Zeus Cassius. That god would be a mix between Zeus, the mighty Greek god of the sky, and Mount Cassius. While digging around the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt, archaeologists spotted two pink granite columns sticking out of the ground. And bingo! They believe these columns were part of the temple's front gate and had collapsed during an earthquake many years ago. And speaking of gods, there were not only super serious gods. Recently, scientists dug up a golden ring in a city south of Cairo. No, Frodo, it is not magical. It was a normal gold ring, but it had a picture of the god of fun, officially named Bes. This god is often described in sacred texts as a happy, chubby dwarf. Today, many tattoos people get are kind of stripped of meaning and are made only for looks. In ancient Egypt, though, women would get tattoos as a sign of protection during childbirth. That is what scientists think, at least. Around the Nile region, scientists found some mummies that had well-preserved tattoos, which is rare because skin breaks down so easily. Two of these women had tattoos on their lower backs, and the drawings were simple. They were mostly pictures, including that same chubby dwarf we just talked about, Bes. He also had a side job as the protector of women during childbirth. Now, would you believe me if I told you ancient Egyptians invented robots? No? Well, that is because that is not completely true. Sure, they were astronomers, mathematicians, and engineers, and somehow they also added one strange invention to that list, an automated goddess some scientists called Hathor. This wooden statue had been in the Metropolitan Museum of Art for years before someone noticed its secret. With the help of an X-ray machine, specialists discovered a mechanical system inside it. The pulley-like axle goes from the statue's shoulder to her left leg. When the system turns, the statue raises and lowers her hand. Hey, pick me, I have my hand up here. There are countless doors all over the world that have not been opened for decades and even centuries. The question is why? It seems that these days you can open any door you want. The truth is that some doors were sealed for a very serious reason, and so far nobody has found out what treasures and mysteries they hide. Here are 4 doors that keep their secrets very well. The Taj Mahal. First up, we have the Taj Mahal in India, one of the most romantic places in the world. Shah Jahan ordered it built in 1631 and dedicated it to his 3rd wife, whom he loved like crazy. They were married for 19 years and had a huge 14 children together. But sadly, she died while giving birth to their last baby. Shah Jahan was heartbroken and decided to build an epic tomb to remember her. The construction took a huge 20 years to finish. The building has a very interesting layout. The design is super unusual, with 4 massive 130-foot-tall minarets standing at the corners of a huge platform. They are not just there to look nice. Back in the 17th century, architects were having some serious problems with buildings falling under their own weight. So, the chief architect of the Taj Mahal made sure to place those minarets as far away from the tomb as possible. And he even tilted them so that if they did fall, they would not destroy the rest of the Taj Mahal. Talk about planning ahead. The Taj Mahal is hiding some wild secrets. There are sealed rooms all over the place that nobody is allowed to enter. And if you look at photos of the building from the riverside, you can spot 2 basements. But guess what? They are sealed too. Nobody knows what is inside or why they have been locked up since the time of Shah Jahan. Apparently, there is a good reason why those rooms are off limits. Some researchers think they were built using marble, which turns into a different substance called calcium carbonate if it is exposed to carbon dioxide. And when that happens, tiny pieces of marble start chipping off like crazy. To make things worse, no air flows into these rooms. That means that if too much CO2 builds up in the basement, the 4 minarets could collapse. But wait, in perfect condition. Why not? Who knows what those mysterious rooms might be hiding? The Great Sphinx of Giza. The Great Sphinx of Giza is covered in mystery. It is not just the largest monolith statue in the world, but it is also a hybrid creature with a woman's head and a lion's body that comes from Egyptian and Greek mythology. It is also very ancient. It is estimated to be around 4,500 years old. Building this wonder took about 3 years and needed 100 workers who were not slaves and were treated with foods like sheep and goat meat. It is also thought that it used to be much bigger than it is now. Archaeologists found huge stone blocks and abandoned toolkits near the site. However, the real secrets of the Sphinx lie underground near its paws. A group of scientists used a seismograph to detect 2 hidden chambers beneath the Sphinx's paws. Some people think these rooms might be the legendary Hall of Records, which holds ancient scrolls revealing the secrets of the universe. I mean, that is way cooler than any library I have ever been to. Rumor says that the Egyptians even had information on Atlantis hidden down there, which is like a super old version of a conspiracy theory. Sadly, we cannot go on an adventure to check it out just yet. The chambers supposedly have 2 entrances, but both are still sealed. The researchers have not yet gotten the green light to test their theory. Let us hope they do not keep us waiting forever. Sri Padmanabhaswamy Temple. This temple is in the beautiful state of Kerala in India. This temple is famous for more than just its breathtaking beauty. Under the temple, there are 6 vaults creatively named A, B, C, D, E, and F. The huge iron doors to these chambers add to the mystery of what is behind them. A few years back, the authorities decided to open these vaults to the world. But it was not an easy job. You cannot just open the doors and walk into the vaults. It took a lot of work. It took them a while, but finally, in 2011, they opened 5 of the 6 chambers. And guess what? They found tons of treasure. Bags of gold, precious gemstones, and priceless diamond jewelry. The estimated value of everything found in the vaults is a huge $1 trillion. It is like the temple was the real-life inspiration for Aladdin's Cave of Wonders. But wait, I said 5 of the 6. What happened to the last one? Vault B has stayed closed, but not because people did not try. They simply could not open it. There is even a belief that it is fatally cursed. Legend says that only a saint or sage can break the curse by chanting a special mantra, but no one has been able to do this yet, probably because we do not have saints or sages ready to help. There is also a rumor that in the 1930s, some temple invaders tried to enter Vault B to do some good old looting, but they never reached their goal. Apparently, terrible snakes appeared out of nowhere and chased the gang away. But of course, this is only an urban legend, and there is no proof of it. However, it is said that the Auditor General working with the temple claimed that Vault B had been opened at least 7 times since 1990, and nothing bad happened to anyone who entered. Who knows, maybe we should send Indiana Jones to check it out. The First Emperor's Tomb. Deep under a hill, completely untouched and surrounded by dangerous traps, lies an ancient tomb. It belongs to Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China. He was born in the Qin state and became king when he was just a boy. But when he grew up and gained full power, he united the warring states. Ancient China had been divided into separate states, and he conquered them. After that, he created the Qin dynasty. When he died in 210 BCE, they buried him deep underground in a huge tomb. And when I say huge, I mean huge. Back in 1974, some farmers in Xin, China, came across something strange while digging a well: a huge terracotta soldier. This discovery led to a major archaeological dig that has gone on for over 40 years, revealing a collection of thousands of clay soldiers. The special thing about these soldiers is that each one has its own unique features, from hairstyles to facial expressions. It is believed that there could be up to 8,000 of these soldiers, but only 2,000 have been found so far. Interestingly, the central tomb, which is believed to be the emperor's resting place, is still untouched. In ancient records, there are references to a huge underground city that the emperor built, complete with scenic towers, palaces, and all kinds of things. Sima Qian, a Han Dynasty historian, wrote that the tomb was decorated with treasures and had space for hundreds of officials, but the lack of technology to properly study the site is what is slowing things down. Qin Shi Huang was surrounded by liquid mercury in his tomb, with two of the streams representing China's major rivers, the Yellow River and the Yangtze. The ancient Chinese believed that mercury could provide immortality, but it may have also caused the emperor's death because he often took mercury pills to make his life longer. The dangerous levels of mercury in the soil near the tomb are the main reason why scientists are afraid to explore it. It could be very dangerous for both people and the environment. Now, if I had to choose which door to open, I would probably go for the one that does not lead to a tomb surrounded by poisonous mercury. Call me crazy, but I would like to avoid any possible health dangers. Unlike many other ancient Egyptian burial sites, King Tutankhamun's tomb stayed hidden and free from unwanted thieves for 3,000 years. One reason was that the tomb was smaller than average and tucked away in a place called the Valley of the Kings. This area was already being explored a lot by the time people found Tut's spot. The entrance was completely covered in debris from building a nearby tomb, which must have also helped keep it secret. There were also no writings or signs on the outside of the tomb. Time also helped keep it in amazing shape until the 1920s, when a man named Howard Carter finally got inside. But was Carter really that much of a hero? Some recent findings say he may have been sneakier than people first thought. People used to think Carter was not just a glorified treasure hunter. He was a true archaeologist. Before Tut, he had been on a non-stop search for Egyptian artifacts. He discovered his interest in these unusual objects when he was a child, and soon started drawing the sculptures and inscriptions found in ancient tombs. After finding the remains of King Tut, Carter spent a decade recording and handling all kinds of objects like golden thrones, chariots, and statues from Tut's tomb, shipping them down the Nile to Egypt's museum in Cairo. Well, at least that was the official story. More recent discoveries claim that not all the objects made it to Egyptian officials. A secret letter seems to reveal Carter's little 10 for them, one for me policy. The letter in question was sent to Sir Alan Gardner, a philologist and friend of Carter's, and dated from 1922. In these writings, Carter mentioned finding the tomb and was asking his buddy for some advice. In another letter from 1934, Gardner seems to be thanking Carter for an amulet that was sent to him as a thank you gift. Carter strongly said it did not come from Tut's tomb, but it clearly did. Even the British director of the Egyptian Museum was aware of Carter's sneaky behavior, but could not prove it. He compared Gardner's amulet to others from Tut's tomb, and sure enough, they were a perfect match. Gardner was so upset about being put in such an awkward situation that he complained to Carter in another letter. Choosing to be a good friend, Gardner did not throw the famous archaeologist under the bus. Instead, he advised Carter to take those stolen goods back to Cairo. Just like I would advise you to like this video and subscribe for more amazing videos on the most unique topics in history. It is not the only suspicious piece of information about Carter's behavior after the discovery. In 1947, a man named Alfred Lucas, who used to work with the controversial archaeologist, shared some information in an obscure journal in Cairo. He claimed that Carter secretly cracked open the burial chamber door himself. Then he sealed it back up like nothing had happened before the official opening. Now, why would he do that? Well, the same theory suggests that Carter and his crew may have entered the tomb early so they could get their hands on some ancient treasures. Obviously, these people could not risk having such objects sold while they were still alive, but they made sure they were auctioned off after they died. Carter, though, never admitted to anything. He also made no official denial. But the Egyptian government could not risk any more mysterious disappearances, so they stopped him from entering the tomb for a while. Some people have connected this apparent stealing to the curse of King Tut. If you have never heard of it, know that it became quite a scary story soon after King Tutankhamun's resting place was uncovered. It claimed that anyone messing with the tomb of the boy pharaoh would face some serious bad luck. It is not all dramatic, like a mummy going on a wild rampage, but word spread that the people involved in disturbing King Tut's tomb met some mysterious early deaths. The main death linked to this supposed curse is that of George Herbert, the 5th Earl of Carnarvon. He was the British aristocrat who helped pay for the search for the tomb. He died just a year after the tomb was opened. Now, people love to call it mysterious, but it turns out Herbert was already in very poor health when he got to Cairo, and he ended up dying from a normal disease. Now, let us talk numbers. There were a lot of people connected to this tomb opening: security guards, archaeologists, and support staff. And sure, a few of them did die not long after the tomb started getting visitors. As much as we would like this curse to be true for the sake of, a good story, statistically, if you have a bunch of people connected to opening a tomb, you would expect some deaths just by random chance. The average lifespan for those supposedly targeted by the ancient curse was more than 20 years after the spell was supposed to begin. Herbert's daughter even lived until the 1980s. That is, half a century later. And Howard Carter himself lived until 1935, a solid 16 years after the big discovery. Some have suggested that the whole curse was nothing more than a clever PR strategy. You see, when Tut's tomb was found, Howard Carter wanted to make it a priority to keep nosy reporters away, so he may have come up with a curse hanging over anyone who entered the boy king's resting place. But what was stolen from King Tut's tomb anyway? Well, some jewelry to start with. It may have been taken by Howard Carter himself. According to a French specialist, he did some deep research by studying old pictures taken inside the tomb back in the 1920s. He compared those images to different objects from museums and auction houses. He soon began to figure out where some of Tut's jewelry had gone. First up, there is this collar that used to be on Tut's chest. It was broken into pieces, and some parts went through Carter to the Nelson Atkins Museum in Missouri. Meanwhile, other pieces ended up on a necklace owned by some unnamed people who tried to sell it in 2015 but failed. Even the Nelson Atkins Museum agrees, as they have confirmed the information on their website. Then there is a piece of a headdress. Some beads from it that once belonged to Tut were apparently stolen by Carter too. They were also strung into a necklace and are now being kept at the St. Louis Art Museum. Another fancy collar made of glazed ceramic faience spent some time at the Met, far away in New York. Thankfully, it was sent back to Egypt a little over a decade ago. This seems to have been, as you would expect by now, also stolen by Carter. Missing artifacts aside, King Tut still gave us a ton of amazing objects that helped us learn more about this incredible ancient culture. Starting with the famous burial mask. It is this huge 21-inch gold work of art with semi-precious stones and glass paste. It weighs 22 pounds and shows the boy pharaoh with a long beard and a headdress with a cobra and vulture. On the back, there is a spell from an important ancient Egyptian spiritual book that is supposed to make sure it works just as well in the afterlife. Tut was also apparently a board game fan. They found 4 board games in his tomb, some made of ivory. Archaeologists also found a pair of gold sandals, though you would imagine they were more for show than for comfort. In fact, the pharaoh probably never wore them during his lifetime. Now, speaking of fashion items, it turns out Tut was quite the stylish ruler. They even found a mannequin in his tomb that was used to choose, adjust, and store his outfits and jewelry. The boy king also seems to have enjoyed music based on the 2 trumpets historians found in his tomb. Though they were played back in 1935 in a BBC broadcast, the instruments are now considered too fragile to be handled.